Thanks to Nurx for sponsoring this video. If you know me, you know I am not a sports person. I've accepted my fate as someone who can tell you every Super Bowl halftime performer and none of the teams that have played. I've been known to ask questions like, so when exactly is March Madness? I've resigned to a life of being mansplained the term offsides. I'm just not a sports person. Unless it's a sport that combines athleticism, artistry, and sparkly uniforms. I'm a sports person when it comes to gymnastics. I'm definitely biased because I did gymnastics growing up. I even made a whole short film about gymnastics, which you can watch here on YouTube. I love watching it. It's surreal. The way gymnasts flip, fly, and fling their bodies through the air feels like it should only be physically possible in an animated universe. There's nothing like watching someone effortlessly defy gravity, but as otherworldly as the sport may seem, for decades, the image of the ideal gymnast has remained rigid, thin, white, and girlish. While this image still looms, it's impressive how much more diverse gymnastics has become in the past decade, especially in terms of race. 12 years ago at the London Olympics, Gabby Douglas became the first Black gymnast to win the individual all-around gold medal. In the process, she became America's sweetheart and undoubtedly inspired countless gymnasts to pursue a sport that seemed once out of reach. In the years since, gymnastics has become more melanated than ever. In 2024, nearly half of the U.S. national gymnastics team are Black women. At the 2023 World Championships in Belgium, 3 Black women, Simone Biles, Brazil's Rebecca Andrade, and Shilese Jones, swept the all-around podium for the first time at a global event. And before that, in 2022, Connor McClain, Shilese Jones, and Jordan Chiles became the first Black women to sweep the podium at a U.S. Championships. At the Paris Games this summer, there is real potential for the U.S. gymnastics team to be entirely women of color or majority Black. This is significant for so many reasons, but especially in the context of gymnastics. It's an image-oriented sport where Eurocentric ideals of beauty and femininity prevail. There are rules and points and numbers, but image is a big part of it. This is typically judged through artistry, and art can be famously subjective. Dominique Dawes, the first Black woman to win an individual Olympic gymnastics medal in 1992, described herself then as a walking deduction due to things she couldn't control, like her body type and skin color. In the sport, gymnasts who have the international look are perceived to possess a higher level of artistry and grace. While it may seem like an innocuous term, the international look is thinly veiled language to describe gymnasts who are thin and typically white. These are the gymnasts who tend to thrive in the sport. So how did we get to a point where Black women are representing USA gymnastics at the highest level? That's what I want to explore in today's video, the tanning of the gymnastics playing field. Before we get into that though, I would like to thank Nurx for sponsoring this video. Okay, you know those days when you wake up looking really good, but you can't put a finger on why? Not to brag, but I've been having those days a lot. Except I can't put my finger on why. It's my eyelashes, and it's because of the Nurx eyelash growth serum. I love the look of long eyelashes, but I simply do not have the dexterity for falsies or the wherewithal to maintain eyelash extensions. Nurx offers the only FDA-approved serum for eyelash growth, and it is clinically proven to deliver results. Prescription strength eyelash growth serum is more effective than what you can get in stores, so you can stop wasting time on over-the-counter products and DIYs. Instead, get safe, clinically tested, and proven eyelash growth serum with Nurx. It's super simple. Just apply the serum to your upper eyelids every night using the special applicator for each eye, which is included with your prescription delivery. With Nurx, you can get dermatologist-trusted eyelash growth serum online without waiting weeks for an in-person appointment. So thanks again to Nurx for sponsoring this video, and for the free product, head to nurx.com/AmandaMariana or click the link in the description. That's nurx.com/AmandaMariana. Okay, back to gymnastics. I want to start off with a brief history of the sport. Gymnastics has roots dating all the way back to ancient Greece, where it was part of physical education and military training. The sport evolved over centuries with influences from various cultures and regions. Modern gymnastics began to take shape in the early 19th century in Germany with individuals like Friedrich Ludwig Jahn, known as the father of gymnastics. Jahn initiated the Turnverein movement. Turnverein translates to gymnastics club. He opened the first one in 1811 to use organized exercise to inspire young Prussian gymnasts with a sense of national duty and solidarity. The Turnverein were centers for cultivation of modern gymnastics, where apparatuses like the balance beam, parallel bars, and vaulting horse were introduced. Competitive gymnastics emerged in the late 19th century. The International Gymnastics Federation, FIG, was founded in 1881, providing a governing body for the sport. Gymnastics became an Olympic sport in 1896 for men and in 1928 for women, but for the purposes of this video, I'll focus on the rise of women's artistic gymnastics, which traces back to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union competed in their first Olympics in 1952. They previously abstained because it was thought to be too bourgeoisie. The Olympic movement in the early 1900s had members of the aristocracy and upper class disproportionately represented on athletic teams. The Soviet Union was a staunch supporter of amateurism, which derived from an attempt to price the poor out of high-level sports. By the 1940s, the Olympics had moved away from its aristocratic roots. The games had become more focused on the common man. The Soviet Union was also in the early stages of the Cold War and came to see the Olympics as a necessity if it wanted to prove that its economic and political systems were superior to its Western counterparts. So they showed up at the 1952 Olympics for the first time and they swept. They would remain undefeated in the team competition for the next 40 years. Soviet gymnasts were known for their stoic demeanors and intense focus, but this image changed when a 17-year-old Olga Korbut came flying into the scene. Korbut gained international recognition at the 1972 Olympics, where she won 3 gold medals. What made her memorable wasn't just her gymnastics, it was her endearing personality. She smiled and waved to spectators, she cried when she performed poorly. She was cute, charming, and human, the embodiment of the girl next door. Some observers called her the world's darling and a Soviet pixie, while others praised Korbut's feminine charm. But it wasn't all preternatural. It was by design. In her memoir, Korbut wrote that it was her coach who devoted countless hours teaching her how to win over the public and make the smile a central part of her performance. It worked. Coming off her Olympic success, Korbut dominated media headlines when the Soviet women's gymnastics team toured the United States. The tour was so significant that the president, Richard Nixon, invited the Soviet women's gymnastics team to the White House. Olga's performance literally reduced tension during the Cold War. Korbut not only impacted the geopolitical climate, but the nature of the sport of gymnastics. Her appearance at the 1972 Olympics is credited with shifting gymnastics from a niche to mainstream sport. Prior to 1972, gymnastics prioritized balletic routines over acrobatics. In the decade following Korbut's Olympic debut, the emphasis was reversed. Her popularity and success exemplified a shift in what was considered to be the ideal gymnast: feminine, tiny, and youthful. By the time the 1976 games rolled around, Olga faded to the background and a new prodigy took her place as the Olympic sweetheart, Nadia Comaneci. Born in a small town in Romania, Nadia began gymnastics as a kindergartner. By the age of 6, she was chosen to attend Bella Caroli's experimental gymnastics school when he was looking for gymnasts to train from a young age. By the time she was 14, Comaneci made history at the 1976 Montreal Olympics. She was awarded the first perfect 10 in Olympic gymnastics, became the youngest ever all-around champion, and an overnight sensation. She contributed to the trend of increasing difficulty in women's gymnastics. Because she was so petite, it was easier for her to perform acrobatic skills. She successfully performed the first release move on uneven bars, a maneuver in which a gymnast lets go of the bar and recatches it. Like Olga, a huge part of Nadia's appeal was her girlish appearance. Both gymnasts wore ribbons in their hair, and it emblemized the shift where gymnastics was becoming a sport not for women but for girls. While femininity continues to be important in gymnastics, Nadia Comaneci's success changed the kind of femininity that was prioritized. Before teen gymnasts started winning, gymnastics was dominated by women in their 20s and 30s who exhibited an elegant, womanly femininity, when younger gymnasts excelled by performing difficult acrobatic skills. The femininity that was prioritized shifted. It was a girlish femininity, as smaller, prepubescent bodies could perform more difficult skills. This didn't change the fact that Black women who have been historically masculinized didn't fit into either of these feminine ideals. There's no record of Black women competing in gymnastics at the national or international level until the 1980s. In 1983, Diane Durham became the first Black gymnast to win a USA national championship. She was coached by Bella and Marta Caroli, Nadia Comaneci's former coaches, who had defected from Romania to the United States. Durham moved from her hometown of Gary, Indiana, to Houston to train with the Carolis. She was their first elite American gymnast and helped the Carolis make a name for themselves as coaches in the States. A few years before Diane's historic win, Lucy Collins, a 16-year-old from Inglewood, California, became the first Black woman to make the U.S. Olympic gymnastics team, earning a spot on the 1980 squad. However, she never competed because the U.S. boycotted the Olympics that year. Similarly, Diane Durham narrowly missed her opportunity to compete on the Olympic stage. At the U.S. team trials for the 1984 Summer Olympics, Durham was in 6th place after the first day. Competing for one of 7 slots, she was expected to make the team and become the first Black gymnast to compete for the United States at the Olympics, but Durham injured her ankle on vault and withdrew from the competition on the expectation that she would be petitioned onto the Olympic team. She only later learned that she was ineligible because she had not competed in the 1983 World Championships and expressed regret no one had told her that finishing the trials on an injured ankle was her only route to the Olympics. Her coach, Bella Caroli, couldn't persuade the USA Gymnastics Federation to allow Diane on the team, and she eventually withdrew from competing in 1985 at the age of 16 years old. It wasn't until 1992 that a Black gymnast would compete for the U.S. at the Olympics. Betty Okino was a prodigy who trained under Bella Caroli. She won the 1991 American Cup and was expected to make the 1992 Olympic team, but serious spinal injuries forced her to miss both the 1992 U.S. Nationals and Olympic trials. In spite of this, she was added to the U.S. team for the 1992 Olympics based on her performance at a second private trial for U.S. Gymnastics Federation officials and coaches. In retrospect, this seems like poetic justice for when Diane Durham was denied the opportunity to petition onto the Olympic team. With Okino on the team, the U.S. won their first Olympic team medal, a bronze. And Okino wasn't the only Black gymnast on the team. She was joined by Dominique Dawes, who remained a fixture in U.S. gymnastics. Dawes medaled a total of 4 times at the 1992, 1996, and 2000 Olympics, breaking the glass ceiling, becoming the first Black person to win an individual Olympic medal and the first to win gold in the Olympics for gymnastics. It wouldn't be until 12 years after Dawes' final Olympic appearance that another African American gymnast would take the Olympic stage. That woman was Gabby Douglas, who competed at the 2012 London Olympics. She became the first African-American woman to win the gold medal in the all-around competition. While the Black Olympic gymnasts who came before Gabby undoubtedly faced racism along the path they helped pave, Gabby Douglas was the first gymnast who rose to prominence in the age of social media, and as the all-around winner, she received unprecedented attention. Because of this, there's a much more detailed and accessible paper trail of racism, and specifically misogynoir, that Gabby endured. The day after Gabby's gold medal winning performance, people couldn't stop talking about her hair, which was slicked back into a messy bun and held in place with clips and gel. While it was straightened, you can see the natural texture of her hair because of her edges. Twitter had a field day with this, calling her hair nappy, ugly, and everything in between. Ironically, her teammates like Michaela Maroney and Kyla Ross wore their hair in that similar messy bun style, and no one batted an eye. Black women aren't afforded the luxury of being messy. It's a glaring example of how Black women's appearance is much more scrutinized in sports. And in media coverage, there's a trend of masculinizing Black female athletes and attributing their success to animalistic talent rather than work ethic or skill. In a 2017 ESPN article, Paula Gibbons documented this trend, writing, "What Douglas had over her nearest competitor, a balletic Russian, was an incredible athleticism," noted a reporter covering the 2012 Olympics. Douglas's nickname is the Flying Squirrel. Simone Biles possesses a freakish athleticism who is all muscle with jackhammers for legs, another journalist observed. She moves from apparatus to apparatus like a shark in open water. On a similar note, in 2013, when Simone Biles made history as the first Black woman to win the all-around at the World Championship, Carlotta Forlito, an Italian gymnast who competed, said, "I told Vanessa, teammate Vanessa Ferrari, that next time we should also paint our skin black, so then we could win too." David Ciaroli, the Italian Federation spokesperson, wrote, "Carlotta was talking about what she thinks is the current gymnastics trend. The code of points is opening chances for colored people known to be more powerful and penalizing the typical Eastern European elegance, which, when gymnastics was more artistic and less acrobatic, allowed Russia and Romania to dominate the field." Use of the phrase colored people in 2013 aside, Ciaroli's defense just doesn't hold up. It was Nadia Comaneci, a Romanian gymnast, who pioneered the increase of acrobatics in gymnastics. Comaneci's beam routine is a clear example of how the sport had become far more difficult than it was just 4 years earlier. Comaneci's routine included 6 flight elements, 5 more than Corbett's winning 1972 routine, indicating a large increase in acrobatic work. Whilst Corbett's routine had included numerous walkovers as her dominant acrobatic element, Comaneci included flick-flacks and aerials, elements which included flight and therefore a far greater level of risk and skill. Comaneci's introduction of the release on uneven bars had a lasting effect on the sport too. This became commonplace in the routines throughout the 80s and 90s. Amongst critics, there's this conception that Simone Biles has single-handedly taken the artistry out of artistic gymnastics and placed all the emphasis on difficulty. After Simone dominated the 2014 World Championships, Bruno Grandi, president of the International Gymnastics Federation, is reported to have said, "Too much of the gymnastics he saw at that competition was acrobatic and not too much artistry," adding that he didn't want to lose the artistic aspect of artistic gymnastics. But it was the same Grandi who advocated for the open-ended scoring system the International Gymnastics Federation introduced in 2006. The new system didn't completely throw away the perfect 10, but it added a difficulty score, which rewards gymnasts for high-level skill. Each score is now the sum of the difficulty points, which is theoretically unlimited, and an execution, which is based out of 10. A scoring system like this incentivized gymnasts to perform more difficult acrobatic skills, and it's why Simone is so dominant in the sport. But it's not just her difficulty. She consistently has great execution. At the 2024 National Championships, Simone won every single event. While some gymnasts had higher difficulty scores on beam and bars, Simone still won despite having lower difficulty routines because of her strong execution. On events like vault and floor, Simone is essentially untouchable because her difficulty is miles ahead of the playing field. On vault, she fell performing her self-titled Biles vault, but her score was still the best because of how hard it is. The open-ended scoring system encourages gymnasts like Simone to innovate on the acrobatic level. She probably wouldn't be doing these skills if there wasn't such a large incentive. This perceived loss of artistry in gymnastics dates back decades before Simone entered the scene and before the open-ended code of points was introduced in 2006. Bill Sands, longtime expert in gymnastics, believed Comaneci was influential in treating gymnastics as a way to excel and perfect rather than perform. He described her as machine-like in her performance. It was agreed that Comaneci lacked Courbet's charm, but her technical skill made her unstoppable. Sands theorized that the Romanian team wanted consistent performance, so they would have fewer errors, but sacrificed the aspect of artistry to do so. This was a risky direction to take, as judges at the time were impressed by emotional, artistic performances. Sands argued, the Romanians provided the public with real beauty, but it is a beauty of fine engineering rather than that of the more esoteric forms of art, such as dance ability to emote and ability to communicate a message. Sands, perhaps unknowingly, made a highly significant observation with what he describes is really a change in the style of aesthetics displayed by the gymnast. Until this point, two types of aesthetic movement had dominated gymnastics: the expression of emotion through movement, which was demonstrated in the floor routines of the 1950s and 60s, and the demonstration of the spectacular present on vault since the sport's inception and introduced to uneven bars and balance beam by Courbet. By contrast, Comaneci introduced a new type of aesthetic. She displayed such technical skill, expertise, and excellence that beauty through perfection was created. In reality, this style of aesthetic had always been present in gymnastics, as the judging system was created with the aim of gymnasts striving for perfection in their work, a goal which is symbolized by the perfect 10. However, until Comaneci demonstrated this style of movement and was accordingly rewarded a 10, it was not considered as important as the other types of movement. Ironically, when viewing the comments on Comaneci's routines today, she is regarded as having a high level of artistry. They describe her as looking graceful, having fun, and a performer, unlike modern gymnasts whose routines are full of mechanical movements. I think it shows that context is everything. Compared to Courbet, Comaneci was robotic, and compared to modern gymnasts, her showmanship is incredible. In gymnastics commentary, artistry is often conflated with body type. The gymnasts who are most artistic are said to have long lines, aka they are thin. Nastia Liukin, for example, was lauded for this. And it's true, she had long legs and a great toe point that farther extended their appearance. Her moves were undoubtedly graceful, but gymnasts with shorter, more muscular body compositions aren't considered artistic despite having equally straight legs and pointed toes. While race does not determine body type, many Black gymnasts fall into the latter category and are perceived as less artistic because of their aesthetic. Black women with muscular builds often failed to thrive in artistic sports like gymnastics and figure skating, frequently labeled as powerful as opposed to graceful or elegant. With the introduction of the new scoring system in 2006, the difficulty element allowed gymnasts whose bodies were not the artistic ideal to make up for it with high-level skills. But while the system was meant to encourage innovation, at times, Simone Biles has been punished for it. In 2019, her double-double beam dismount was undervalued. While not as extreme, it's reminiscent of Surya Bonali, a black figure skater who performed a backflip in the 1998 Winter Olympics, but was penalized because the move was deemed illegal because of how dangerous it was. Thankfully, Simone's most recent foray into the stratosphere was fairly rewarded. Her Biles 2 vault holds a 6.4 difficulty score, which is actually higher than what she expected. Like I mentioned up top, the main focus for this video is how the racial demographics of women's artistic gymnastics is changing. It seems one of the biggest contributors to this is simply representation. When a gymnast sees someone who looks like her succeeding, it seems within reach. While Simone Biles and Gabby Douglas have less than a 2-year age difference, Biles wasn't age qualified for the 2012 Olympics, and she wasn't a serious contender at that point either. However, she was well into her elite gymnastics career at that point, and still credited Gabby Douglas as an inspiration. While representation has undoubtedly increased diversity in the sport, one of the biggest barriers to gymnastics is economic. It's an expensive, relatively inaccessible sport because it requires a lot of equipment and coaches with highly specialized knowledge. I do think that the trend of increased racial diversity in gymnastics will continue, especially since there's such a high chance that the US Olympic team this year will be majority black. It's really refreshing to see this in a sport that has been traditionally ingrained with Eurocentric standards of beauty and femininity. As usual, I would love to hear your thoughts below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye! Whoa!